Hello and welcome back to Histories Tech, and today we are looking at the Me-262, the aircraft that would basically create air-to-air combat with a jet. Now I'm calling it the grandfather of air-to-air combat in a jet, mainly because it never engaged another jet in combat, and I'm going to give the father of air-to-air combat to a later jet. Now to understand the origins of the 262, we've got to go back to Germany in 1936, and that is when the Heinkel HE-178, the world's first jet-powered aircraft, took flight. Because this flight took place within 1 week of Germany's invasion of Poland, the German government went ahead and decided to basically push forward the development of a jet engine advanced fighter aircraft. Now this aircraft went through multiple development issues, mainly because of this right here, the BMW 003 turbojet engine. This engine actually ended up being much heavier than they originally thought and actually had to redesign the aircraft multiple times in order to handle the engines. The design was so different that they actually had to build a piston-powered prototype of the 262 just to be able to see if the newly designed wings would be able to have stable flight characteristics. After this design was found to be stable, they went ahead and attached a pair of these pod engines to the 262, but still flew it on the propeller piston engine. And as with this design, they kind of tested different wing configurations, moving the engines back and forth to find the optimal design for the engine while they were still working on developing the BMW 003s because they were behind schedule. Finally, in July of 1942, they managed to get the aircraft to fly completely under jet power, only by removing the BMW 003s and replacing them with a pair of Jumo 004 engines. Development would continue in the 262, including rearranging its landing gear configuration from a tail wheel gear setup to a tricycle arrangement, as they discovered the exhaust from this could actually destroy the elevators and the runway it was taking off from. By 1943, due to limited production of engines, the development of the aircraft in production was actually stalled. Additionally, it was stalled because at this point Hitler had redesigned his vision for the 262 and wanted it to become a ground attack aircraft. So development and production of the 262 was stalled until 1944. By April of 1944, the first units were deployed with the Me-262, and in July of 1944, we are going to see the first air-to-air combat use of a jet fighter when an Me-262 encounters a British Mosquito. The Germans would then spend the next several months basically honing and trying to design methods to use a jet-engined aircraft properly in combat. Now, they would actually see their first loss in November of 1944 when they are shot down by anti-aircraft guns from the British RAF. This actually begins a campaign of losses for the Germans and the 262 as the Allies begin attacking them twofold. One, they strictly target the airfields that the 262s are on, destroying them on the ground, and two, setting up basically nets of anti-aircraft fire specifically to take down the 262. At this point, the Germans switch tactics and stop using it as an interceptor and try to use it as a ground attack vehicle, but after subsequent 12 losses in a row in a 2-week time frame, they abandon this plan. Now, the role of the 262 kind of changes as we get to March of 1945, when they're basically used to try and stop massive waves of incoming bombers, and it's the first time they're actually able to deploy large numbers of the 262s. However, it's kind of a little bit too little too late kind of a scenario, and they're not able to make enough of a dent by the end of the European campaign in World War II. And thus, by the time they get to the end of the war, they haven't made much of an impact, mainly due to small numbers and a lot of issues in development. Because also at this time, we actually start seeing German pilots defecting. And the Allies get their hands on these aircraft, and this is going to change the development of aircraft for the British, for the Americans, and the Soviet Union. Interestingly enough, even as the Germans were running out of resources and things like that, they were still making massive plans for the 262, including a high-speed variant seen here. While none of these plans came to fruition, it showed that the 262 was just the beginnings for the Luftwaffe and German jet engine development. While that was the end of the 262 for Germany, it was not the end of the 262. After the war, the Czechoslovakians took the design and actually built their own indigenous version of the Me-262. This aircraft's importance cannot be underestimated, so much so that there's about 10 of these sitting in museums around the world, and 3 reproductions of this aircraft that are actually flying around the world. But there you have it, a real quick look at the legacy of the Me-262, the aircraft that basically started air-to-air jet combat, and its legacy is still long-lived. It would actually influence multiple aircraft designs, not only being copied basically for the Nakajima Kika and the Sukhoi Su-9 by the Soviet Union, but also influence the design of the North American F-86 Sabre, the MiG-15, and the Boeing B-47 Stratojet, amongst other aircraft. And it's important towards influencing the change from piston-driven aircraft to jet aircraft cannot be underestimated, that it signaled that it was time for change. But that's it for today. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the next time.